Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
And I'm your co-host, Kenna.
Okay, Kenna, today I wanted to ask, how much do you get paid to take out the trash at your house?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. How much do you get paid to do the dishes?
Nothing.
And what about, making the bed?
Nothing.
And I'm guessing, though, you still do those things even without someone paying you money to do them?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. I mean, not as much as my boyfriend, but I do a little, So what's the motive or incentive to do those tasks if you're not receiving, a cash payment of money?
I just don't want my place to be disgusting.
Right. It's we just want the places we live to be a little more enjoyable for us to live in, right?
I don't want to live in a punk house anymore, man.
Right. We're past the punk house phases of our lives. I'm stepping over a mouse spleen that my punk roommate's punk cat killed in our kitchen, and then we just let stay there for months on principle. To get over that, to get to the bathroom, I'm done with that stage of my life. So the clean house, all it does is make our lives and the places we live a little bit nicer, and yet we all still do it. So today, I thought it would be fun to talk about non-monetary economies, of which our households are a great example. So when most of us think about money, we think about exchanging our labor for cash, right? Like at a job. And that cash we then use to purchase all of the things we want or need. And usually we can't afford all of the things we want and need. So then we just prioritize, and then we get some of them, and then we keep on working, selling our labor in exchange for money, working in exchange for money, on repeat, until we hopefully retire or we just die, right? So here where we live in the U.S., money takes on a few different forms. We've got the green paper money. We have that same money in the form of digital currency that we don't ever tangibly hold. I have direct deposit and auto bill pay and all of that. So it's I don't even see the money. I don't touch it most of the time. And we also, now we have cryptocurrency. So I thought maybe before we got into non-monetary economies, I'd start off by describing what money exactly is. So how would you define money? What do you think of?
Maybe it's just I don't know what the Economist Webster's dictionary term is or whatever, but it would be exchanging something in place for goods or services that is not directly bartered. So, for example, instead of giving you a bushel full of apples for a car, do you how
seems fair?
I would give you money instead, because you don't need a bushel full of apples because you already got a shit ton of apples, and then you're no, I want money because I want to buy rocks. Decorative rocks. I feel this is like when you try to come up with you're telling a lie, or they're what, describe who the perpetrator was, and it was you. It was they looked exactly like you.
I like it because I think it says something about how your brain works in terms of shopping. It's shiny goblin brain, You're apples, bushel of apples. And then you're
rocks.
Yeah, ooh, rocks, decorative rocks,
So we don't have to trade bushelful of apples for other shiny objects.
Decorative rock, yes.
Yes.
So that's pretty spot on. Money is a medium of exchange, allowing two people to engage in a transaction over the value of a good or service. So there's a few different types of money. And I think the most old school way we think about money is this thing called commodity money, which is a type of good that functions as a currency. So these would be items that would be widely desired and therefore had some sort of value. They'd be durable, portable, and easily stored. So examples would be things like shells and dried corn, right? Or mother of pearl, which was widely circulated in the Americas for a while as a currency. Cowrie shells, which were used in Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Mayan civilizations used cacao beans. And it includes things like gold. So in 1821, the Bank of England adopted the gold standard, and then other countries followed suit, including the United States. we used the gold standard until 1971. And that just meant that the value of our money was determined based on the value of gold. And all of these countries would have these massive gold reserves. So basically, the paper money that people were using at that time represented a share of gold that the United States was able to issue this money because they had that gold tangibly in their vaults to represent that value. So this would be an example of not just a commodity currency, like just your fancy shells would be like a commodity money form itself. But then you would have this thing that was a commodity-backed currency. So a little green piece of paper represents shiny hunk of gold.
Yes.
Right.
Although I know that is not the case anymore.
You are correct. So now we have something called a fiat currency, which is when little green sheet of money paper does not represent a share of ownership of gold, right? It just has value because we say it has value. So a fiat currency would be any currency produced and used for trade that has been detached from any and all commodity backing, backed only by government guarantees. So forms of fiat currency that we interact with, it's cold, hard, green cash, right? Little bits of paper that only have the value because we've all agreed they have the value, and then it's psychological and you're like, this is valueless, but if I light it on fire, I'll be really sad. So clearly it's not.
That's like the KLF lighting all that $1 million pounds on fire.
Yes. Then you have cashless fiat currencies, which are basically just digital money. So like I was saying, when I get paid, it's direct deposit that goes into my little digital bank account. I just open my app and I see how much is there. And then when I pay my bills, my bank automatically sends that money to the bank accounts of the people I owe the bills money to. And I never actually hold like $1 in my hand. Like, I'm also notorious for never having cash on me. Like, how often do you interact with cash versus just like digital online number represents my monies?
Actually, probably more than most people because I used to work the flea markets.
So you did a cash business.
I did a very heavy cash business. So I had a lot of cash on me, sometimes so much cash that it would scare me because like back in the day when you'd have your rent money on you in cash before you just paid your roommate in like Venmo or something.
Right.
Like I would always be so terrified it was going to fall out of my pocket or like... Yeah, so I definitely have actually dealt in a lot of cash and still sometimes weirdly do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Then, okay, so the third form of money we have, in addition to all of these things, would be cryptocurrency, which is pretty new. Mm-hmm. Right, so cryptocurrency obviously emerged on its own just from the internet, and it's totally decentralized. So it exists outside of any government backing. So where you have, like the commodity money where you're like, the shell is the shell and you want it because it's the shell and you like it. Like, boom, done. That doesn't have to be backed by a government. It's backed by itself. It has value in itself. And then like the second thing, which would be like commodity backed currency, which is like the green paper has value because it represents shiny shell or hunk of gold or whatever. And then you have the fiat currency that's just like, this has value because the government will accept it as legal tender here. Mm-hmm. Then you have cryptocurrency, which isn't backed by a government at all, but also in itself isn't a shiny shell and doesn't represent a hunk of gold, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of unique. So it's a mathematically generated digital currency wherein computers in a network execute difficult number crunching tasks, and at the end, they spit out a unit of cryptocurrency, and the process is called mining. So blockchain, which people talk about all the time, right?
Oh my God.
It's just the ledger that keeps track of all the cryptocurrency that's mined and then subsequently later exchanged. And over time, it becomes progressively more difficult to generate or mine cryptocurrency, creating a finite amount of cryptocurrency available, which assigns it value. So there's no means by which a central bank can like flood the marketplace with new crypto and devalue those already in circulation. It's a pretty finite thing that one day we will not be able to make more of each of these. So all of these things represent money in different ways. And basically modern economists define money as being like a thing. Like, okay, it's money if it has these three components, which is one, it's a store of value, meaning that it allows you to defer consumption until a later date. Like with your apples in your car, you're like, well, maybe I don't need anything yet. Maybe I take the money and then I go and I get myself my decorative rocks later, who knows when, a year from now. Also, it's a unit of account, meaning that it allows you to assign a value to different goods without having to compare them. And the third, it's a medium of exchange, an easy and efficient way to trade goods and services with another person. And money like this has existed for a really long time. The first Indian money occurred during the 6th century BC and consisted of silver bars. The world's first coins appeared in Lydia, which is modern-day Syria, around the same time. And the earliest known mints, like for minting money, date to 650 and 600 BC in Asia Minor, where the elites of Lydia and Ionia used stamped silver and gold coins to pay armies. There's also the Mesopotamian shekel, which is the first known form of currency, which emerged nearly 5,000 years ago. And originally, money acted a little less like a store of value or a medium of exchange, and instead acted more as a tool to define social relationships. So even though it could do all of these things, money in original societies where it was used, it often was just used to do things like arrange marriages, establish the paternity of children, head off feuds, console mourners at funerals, seek forgiveness in the case of crimes, negotiate treaties, and acquire like militant followers, according to economists and historians. And even then, the widespread use of money wasn't even like a universal thing within a small community. As money became popularized and standardized in the Mediterranean amongst like merchants, most people were still subsistence farmers who just farmed enough for them to live off of, and they existed largely outside the money economy. Governments liked money, obviously, because it was a way of collecting taxes and building military forces, but without government insistence, money didn't really matter for the average person. As the Roman Empire declined in the 3rd century, people in places like Britain just kind of stopped using the government's coins altogether. And it felt natural because before that there was, a time when societies operated without money at all. And that was a time that many average people still remembered. So Kenna, what were you taught existed before money?
I think the shiny apples thing. I think it was the barter thing.
Right.
I think it was the bartering apples for rocks thing.
Yes. That's the popular myth
Or
that
it
we're
was
all
just,
taught.
and it's just, or it was just like, we don't talk, like, what are you talking about? It's always been that way.
Right. It's always been money or a need for money.
Or maybe in like feudal society, it was just like you were a vassal or a serf or some sort of indentured servant, or you were enslaved, like, or burdened with some like heavy task where you just, there was like an elite group who controlled you, so you don't have to worry about money.
Yeah, that was kind of like, I think they used to call those natural economies, which is weird because they don't feel natural, right? It's a power structure, which isn't natural.
But you're just like, how do people get the food? And they're like, well, the Lord provides that to the serf, and you're just like, well, how does that work between, because I'm sure the serfs talk to each other,
right,
and like do stuff.
Oh, like trade amongst, I was like, you want the serfs to unionize? Yes, no, no. They talk to each other not to compare notes on how much they've got and try to get better, but instead to like barter amongst themselves.
Yeah, or just like hang out with each other.
Right, or give people things amongst themselves.
But I think maybe there's like a big hole in my historical knowledge from school, but I think that's what we were taught. They're just like, don't worry about it too much.
Yeah, I think we were all taught the barter economy myth. Like, I think that's what we were all taught. Like, one guy's got some bread and he needs a pair of shoes, and this one guy's made extra shoes but needs some bread, and then somehow they find each other and trade the shoes for the bread, right?
Yes.
And then we're taught, like, well, this was an inefficient system, which it is, because how much work is it going to take you to find someone with no bread who wants bread, and you got the shoes in there too, and you got to find the perfect person for your trade, right? That's a lot of work, and who knows if that perfect person who wants the trade as much as you do even exists, or if they even have everything you need.
Yeah,
right?
And then it just hurts your brain, and you're like, enough. Thank you for the monies.
Right. So we're taught that money developed from this conundrum, like these issues that happened with the barter economy. So we're like, we used to have this barter economy, super inefficient, it was really difficult, and then someone invented money and it solved all of our problems. But there's just one problem with this, which is that there's actually no evidence we ever relied on or used barter economies at all. So as David Graeber explains, barter societies didn't actually ever exist. There's evidence that bartering happens sometimes, but like usually between strangers in ceremonial ways. In terms of a larger economic system, though, most economists argue that no one ever actually believed barter was real to begin with. The idea was a crude model used to simplify the context of modern economic systems, not like an actual theory about past ones that existed. So it's been explained as more of a thought experiment to simplify non-monetary economies of the past. An exception to this, though, was apparently Adam Smith, who wrote about these barter economies as though they were real. Yeah, there it is.
And also the invisible hand. We don't know who.
It just is invisible and guides it.
It just works. Don't question why it works.
Right. So Adam Smith wrote, when the division of labor first began to take place, the power of exchanging must frequently have been very much clogged and embarrassed in its operations. And then he goes on to describe the inefficiencies of barter. And then you've got all of these other lazy definitions of economies of the past that just kind of referenced this Adam Smith fairy tale as being super real. According to archaeologist Robert Rosenwig of the University at Albany in New York, Adam Smith based his creation myth of financial systems on ignorance of what actually happened in the past. Instead, what actually happened was more like this. There was a community and there was something more akin to gifting as like an economy or a system of credit and debt that existed outside of money. The idea was kind of built around agrarian principles, which David Graeber explains in his book, Debt, the First 500 years? 5,000 years? I don't remember. But this system kind of makes sense. It's like, say you're a farmer in a community. Crops aren't able to be, like, yielded and harvested all year round, right? They're seasonal. So that means that the farmer would have to be taken care of by his or her community, right? Given tools and garments and furniture, whatever they needed throughout, like, the year until the crops were ready to be harvested. But once the crops were able to be harvested, everyone could eat because not everyone was a farmer, right? So nothing was really kept track of in firm tally. It wasn't like, hey, do you remember when you needed a shovel and I made and gave you a shovel? Well, that shovel took me this amount of time to make, so now you owe me this % of your crop based on that. It's like nobody was doing this, right? They were just kind of going off general vibes, you know? It was a general idea of reciprocation and group survival that drove these gifting economies within communities. Quid pro quo exact exchange-based mentalities are not, contrary to popular belief, intrinsic in human nature, and that feels important here. As Graeber explains, as long as we let the myth that humans have always been exacting in their expectations of compensation and reciprocity, it makes it possible to imagine a world that's nothing more than a series of cold-blooded calculations.
Yeah, okay, this makes me think of, like, when you're at, like, a good party. And, like, some people bring, you know, there's the host sometimes who, like, maybe has some, like, dips and stuff. And someone else will bring some beer. And someone else will bring some chips. And someone else will grab pizza. Or maybe everyone chips in on pizza. Or maybe someone's really flush with cash. And they're like, ooh, I got everybody's Zanku chicken. Or, like...
Right.
Like, and, like... But no one, like... It's always, like, it's kind of, like, the good parties, there's no person going around, okay, well, everybody needs to chip in $8.78 and blah, blah, blah. People are just like, there's beer in the fridge. Oh, there's beer over there. Like, get one if you can. Or, like, we're talking and no one's like, well, you're taking up too much of my time at this party. Like, I need to blah, blah, blah. It's, like, very chill. Like, a good party is very chill. There's no one in charge making everybody do stuff. Everyone's chilling and talking and getting what they need from other people or, like, doing other fun stuff.
Just sharing.
Yeah. It's all sharing. Yeah.
Really. I mean, I think that that's true. I think that, like, that's how humans are inclined to operate. We share with each other. And I feel like that is actually the default, which we know because... We've talked about this. We were just talking about this. When you have a friend who's really exacting, like, oh, you owe me $3.26. All of us are like, yuck, that person's got bad vibes, right? Like bad energy. Because it's not normal. It's not the default to be that monetarily exacting.
I feel the more normal thing is to be like, oh, I got you this time. Maybe next time you got me. Or sometimes you have a friend who's always really super flush and they're like, it drinks on me. And sometimes someone who's really broke. And you're like, I got you. I got you
also,
this time.
Drinks at a bar. When you buy a round of drinks at a bar, usually it's just like, I'll get this one, you get next one. But you're not adding up the value of every single drink that someone ordered.
And sometimes when you're really, really broke, you're like, oh, can't do that this time. And
People will get you, usually.
And a good friend will be like, I got you this time. Like, yeah, they're, like, it gets to be like, there's always people who are a little bit more, like, takers and givers, but, like, generally it comes out in the wash.
Yeah, it does. And I feel like just the idea that we all collectively kind of know it's annoying when people charge you down to the penny for things you've done in group situations. Like, we all know that because it's abnormal. So that kind of speaks to how this exact calculating thing, this proposal that everything had to be like quid for quo, tit for tat, that's not actually how people operate. So, we have all these examples of situations all around us today that are kind of economies where goods and services are exchanged, but it doesn't revolve around money, which we kind of talked about. Yet, despite all evidence showing money has not always been part of human society, whenever presented with the idea that societies could function without money at all, there's like this rallying cry of like neo-capitalists, which is solve the economic calculation problem, or the ECP. So the economic calculation problem was first presented in 1920 by Ludwig von Mises in his essay, Economic Calculation in the Socialist Commonwealth. And it says that without a proper pricing system, you cannot properly allocate factors of production that best suit the subjective value of consumers. Essentially, the ECP seeks to propose that existing in a non-monetary economy would be impossible because people wouldn't be able to assign the value to things like the shiny rocks and the bushel of apples and the car.
But don't we do that anyway? Like, can't you just make up like prices for shit if you wanted to? Like, because we work in fashion, and sometimes, like, or like when I was doing vintage, sometimes I'm like, I don't know there is no governing body that says that this is the price of this stupid vintage t-shirt.
Oh, it's like when you look on eBay to see what other people have bought it for, but it's not on eBay. And you're like, I don't know the market value of this item.
Exactly. So you have to make one up.
Right. You create
You're like, this shirt
value.
is now $50. To someone else, $20. To another person, $150.
Right. The value's always subjective.
So to me, it's like, you could just name your price if it's something.
Right. And also, we know that this isn't really actually an impossibility because non-monetary economies have existed in the past and continue to exist all around us for the entirety of human existence. Humans have still existed operating within communities, exchanging goods and services freely without money there. So we know that people have just been working it out amongst themselves based on the relative value or also the priority of reciprocity at all, right? We all decide these for ourselves, and it's more conversational and it's less formal for sure. But it doesn't actually present a problem most of the time.
Yeah. And like, I think, generally you're just like, people will generally be like, that seems like too much, or that seems like too little. And it's, a weird consensus thing.
Right. And we have these like examples of these non-monetary economies existing like in our culture today. Which show just on their own that the ECP, the economic calculation problem, it's kind of irrelevant because non-monetary economies don't usually seek to assign really stark ideas of value to labor and objects to fit that subjective value of consumers. Like, if you remove money from the equation, it kind of doesn't matter anymore. Instead, non-monetary economies don't separate into producers and consumers so distinctly. They instead focus more on community building, personal drive, and social interconnectedness to operate. And a good example of this is household labor. So remember when I was asking you about cleaning your house for money? Well, major component of our economy is household labor. And most people just do that, without getting paid whatsoever.
Unless you're that TikTok mom during the pandemic who is just like, all you kids have to do your chores, and if you clean the bathroom, you get 3 squares of toilet paper. It
was a kind of non-monetary economy, unless the toilet paper was the currency in that situation.
I think the toilet paper was the currency. And
yes.
I was just like, damn, if I was that lady's kid, I'd just be like, fuck you. I'm not using toilet paper anymore. See how you like it. Or like when I guess when I was a kid, I would do chores and get an allowance, but that's very specific.
Yeah, and as an adult, you don't really, nobody's paying you as an adult in your house to clean your house.
But to me, people will be like, that is strange to make your children do stuff around the house for toilet paper.
Yes, it is less strange to make your kid do chores in exchange for money. But, but that's also a child, and we exist in a society with with money, right? So you're kind of trying to teach them. That's like a learning thing. But like you as an adult in the world, the government's not paying you money to do your dishes.
No.
Nobody's paying you money to do your dishes.
I wish.
Yeah, your mom today isn't paying you money to do dishes at your own apartment.
I mean, actually, I don't wish that, because that would be... I want my independence, okay, Mom?
Right. So in 1998, Redefining Progress, which is a nonprofit organization based in San Francisco, calculated that the total value of household work done in the United States was $1.911 trillion, or about the quarter of the size of the entire US GDP that year. So that was back in 1998. So what this means is that basically, if we all were to hire someone to clean our houses and pay them with money, we as a country would have been spending $1.9 trillion to do that in 1998. But obviously, most people don't hire someone to clean their houses. They just clean them themselves. Or if they do hire someone, they don't do it all. They still clean around the house themselves too, not in exchange for money, just so that their houses are nicer places to be. And studies of domestic work in France have calculated that the total value of household work is between 48 to 65% the national GDP there. Cooking and dishwashing in Australian homes in 1975 to 1976, according to the United Nations University, produced output that could be valued at only slightly less than the GDP, gross product of that country's manufacturing industries. If the same calculations were used to assign value to unpaid work in developing countries, where even more of women's work is unremunerated, the differences would be even greater. So basically, we have this household labor that if we were to assign a dollar value to it, would be huge as its own market. And yeah, this is $1.9 trillion of labor that people are doing unpaid, completely, with no monetary compensation. Another way that we exist within non-monetary economies around us today is caregiving. So 80% of the labor that keeps seniors out of nursing homes is unpaid labor provided by family members. The U.S. federal minimum wage right now is $7.25 an hour. So even if you assumed the cost of professional caregiving was maybe $8, which is still pretty cheap, one economic study by Peter S. Arno found that the national value of that informal caregiving in 1997 would have been $196 billion.
Wow.
By contrast, national spending for formal home health care is only $32 billion, and nursing home care is just $83 billion. So we're doing way more unpaid caregiving in our culture than paid caregiving. According to Gary Becker, families in all societies, including modern market-oriented societies, have been responsible for a sizable part of economic activity, half or more, for they've produced much of the consumption, education, health, and other human capital of the members. If I am correct that altruism dominates family behavior to the same extent as selfishness dominates market transactions, then altruism is much more important in economic life than is commonly understood. The pervasiveness of selfish behavior has been greatly exaggerated by the identification of the economic activity within market transactions. So then, in addition to this caregiving and homework, we also have just civic activity, just volunteering in general. A 2016 study placed the value of volunteer time in the U.S. as $24.14 per hour, finding that Americans therefore contribute $193 billion worth of their time to their communities free of charge.
Wow.
Yeah, and the top 4 national volunteer activities are food collection or distribution, which is nearly a quarter, fundraising or selling items to raise money, which is also nearly a quarter, general labor or transportation, which is around 19%, and tutoring or teaching, which is 18%. And a 2019 study found that 83% of survey respondents volunteer to contribute to a cause they care about, 66% to improve their community, and 63% to spend time doing something that they're interested in. 78% of survey respondents say that understanding their impact helps keep them engaged. And much like we clean our houses to make them nicer places to be, people just like volunteering to help take care of their communities to make their communities nicer places to be. As it stands now, nearly half of all labor in the world is unpaid informal labor, operating within the bounds of a non-monetary economy. According to Edgar S. Kahn, PhD, and an essay about non-monetary economies, when economists measure the productive capacity in terms of our workforce, they exclude children, teenagers, the disabled, persons on public assistance, volunteers, and seniors. Likewise, only paid work is considered real work. Trust, reciprocity, and civic engagement, the connective tissue that holds an entire society together, simply do not exist. We must draw a new map that includes what the noted environmental economist Neva Goodwin has dubbed the core economy, which encompasses family, neighborhood, and community. We have to understand the different principles that apply in this second core economy and realize that the non-monetarized world functions brilliantly, albeit on its own principles of production and distribution. By definition, the non-monetary economy rejects the market price as the measure of value. Normative value drives production and distribution in the non-monetary economy. In the market economy, specialization or division of labor reinforced by self-interest is the dominant principle. In the core economy, though, specialization is replaced by a combination of do-it-yourself that builds self-esteem and a voluntary interdependence that replaces the involuntary dependence that comes with industrial and market specialization. The relevant unit for attaining self-sufficiency is not the atomized individual. In the family, the neighborhood, the village, interdependence is a quintessential element of self-sufficiency. There is task differentiation, but nothing approaching what the market does. Specialists are a last resort. Distribution operates on different principles too. In the market economy, pricing provides a highly efficient, self-regulating, self-adjusting distributive system. Price adjusts supply to demand automatically and continually. What is scarce and what generates money costs more than goods or services that are commonplace and not in short supply. In the 5 non-monetary economies, price is not the mechanism for distribution. No one holds a drumstick up at the dinner table and says, "What am I bid for this?" Caring is not distributed based on ability to pay. Distribution stems from normative considerations: need, fairness, altruism, moral obligation, and contribution. So this core economy that everyone's talking about here is a part of what many call just like a community economy, which forms the basis for society, family, neighborhood, and community on the whole. Similarly, in the master's thesis by Adam D. McBride at Harvard in 2015, it's explained that governments around the world have failed to account for a vast percentage of the economic output of their citizens in record-keeping and policymaking. Through ineffective measures such as the GDP, governments have long attached their nation's value to arbitrary measures of growth, which reflect average wealth or unsustainable industrial output, or other short-sighted and unreflective measures. The last decades, which have been tracked with the rise of GDP as a measurement of economic well-being, have seen the general failure of government to take into account measures aside from economic output, such as happiness, childcare, and housework, when it tallies up the nation's values and sets its economic policies and priorities. Through an unwise and irrational adherence to growth-oriented policies reflected in the GDP, the U.S. government has ignored the true needs and welfare of the American people.
Yes.
Yes, right? Pretty hard agree. So then we get to this point where we're like, all right, how do we imagine a future without money? Political and economic theories do exist that involve no money. And it's kind of like starting to become apparent, if it wasn't before anyway, that maybe money is not such a good thing. An unfortunate byproduct of a market with money is the opportunity for vast wealth hoarding to develop, creating widespread inequality, where some possess resources in excess while others have none at all. It's like not an efficient system of distribution. In the 1950s and 60s, poor and middle-income Americans saw greater income growth than rich ones. However, from 1980 to 2014, this all looked very, very different. People at median income in the U.S., for example, saw their wages stagnate even as inflation rose. Low-income people saw their incomes actually decline. And the rich, the top 1% of wage earners in the U.S., saw their annual incomes go up by roughly 6% each year. And that only includes the rich who continue to earn wages. That's adults receiving an average of $1.3 million per year out of a national income. That wouldn't include people who don't work, the super rich, who just make their money by investing and ownership. Since 1985, the average Wall Street bonus has increased by 1,217%, from $13,970 to $184,000 in 2020. If the federal minimum wage had increased at that rate, it would be worth $44.12 today.
Whoa.
Right? By 2021, we see that the richest 0.1% take in 196 times as much as the bottom 90%. And America's top 1% holds more than half of the national wealth, invested in stocks and mutual funds, generating more wealth without them even needing to work. Had the income of the bottom 90% of Americans kept up with GDP growth, they'd have collectively taken home $2.5 trillion more in 2018. But paychecks for the average Americans haven't even kept up with inflation. Worker hourly compensation increased just 17% between 1979 to 2019, while worker productivity increased more than 72% over that same time period. And all of this happens while expenses go up. We see them continue to rise. For the average American consumer, the share of their expenditures spent on health doubled from 1980 to 2018. And half of U.S. adults with lower incomes skipped necessary medical care, such as doctor's visits, recommended tests, treatments, follow-up care, or prescription medication in the past year because of the high cost, which I can relate to. I've been in those situations before where you have to choose if you're going to go to the doctor and spend money you don't have, or if you're going to do something sketchy. Like I have literally ordered animal medication from other countries online to treat myself. Like I ordered some like fish medication once when I had strep throat. I was like, well, it's the same thing the doctor would give me, and I like can't afford to go to the doctor. And there's like whole forums for Americans dedicated to like calculating your dosage for veterinary care to human care.
Oof.
Yeah, like you can go on a forum and be like, I have this medical issue, but I can't afford to go see a doctor. And people will be like, oh, take this like horse medicine, this one, but you need to adjust the dosage to be this. It's like,
oh my God,
an art form because we can't keep up with the like rising cost of medical care here in the US. And it's not just medical care that's risen in cost. There's also education. The price of education has increased 600% more than incomes from 1980 to 2018. 1 in 4 Americans have no retirement savings, and those who do aren't saving enough. The median retirement savings account of $120,000 for those approaching retirement aged 55 to 64 will likely provide less than $1,000 per month over a 15-year retirement span. In 1940, the median home value in the U.S. was just $2,938. In 1980, it was $47,200, and by the year 2000, it had risen to $119,600. Even adjusted for inflation, the median home price in 1940 would have only been $30,600 in the year 2000, showing that by the year 2000, home prices had risen nearly 400%.
Whoa.
Additionally, a key issue with money is that it's often used as a tool of control. According to an article by Ilana E. Strauss in The Atlantic, Thomas Jefferson suggested that the government encouraged Native Americans to purchase goods on credit so they'd fall into debt and be forced to sell their lands. Today, Black neighborhoods are disproportionately plagued by debt collection lawsuits. Even after taking income into account, debt collection suits are twice as common in Black neighborhoods as in white ones. $34 million was seized from the residents of St. Louis' mostly Black neighborhoods in suits filed between 2008 and 2012, much of which was seized from debtors' paychecks. In Jennings, a St. Louis suburb, there was 1 suit for every 4 residents during that year.
Whoa.
Today, the median white family has 41 times more wealth than the median Black family, and 22 times more wealth than the median Latino family. So we see all of this like inequality starting to spiral out of control. It's like a natural byproduct of capitalism, right? When you're motivated to just keep acquiring money at all costs, you like start to see that people at the bottom aren't getting what they need because the money is kind of finite in our current operating system, right? As David Graeber argues, assigning hard specific value to everything around us via money also helped give way to enabling institutions like slavery, in which people can literally be bought, and imperialism, which was made possible by a system that can feed and pay soldiers fighting far from their homes. German philosopher and media theorist Stefan Heidenreich wrote a book called Money for a Non-Money Economy, in which he hypothesizes that one day money will be gone and just kind of seem like an ancient religion of the past. He speculates that our current money-based global economy could transition instead into a system based on the algorithmic matching of goods and services, just giving people what they need at any moment without relying on the concept of a stable universal price. This would theoretically do away with the vast inequality caused by the current market and create a world instead of equal distribution. Heidenreich's theory would revolve around the idea of matching on the whole. So according to Heidenreich, matching is at the core of any economy. Matching people, things, and abilities with each other is a daily, simple, constant economic task. People need places to live, so people have to be matched with houses. The economy is the way they get matched. In the current money-based market economy, money determines a match, and under the system, the matching is often incomplete. There are plenty of empty houses where nobody lives because they're being used merely as investment vehicles. Houses are being matched with money instead of with people. Heidenreich also says the whole idea that we have to assign numbers and a numerical value to things we want will appear as an absurdity of the early 21st century. This matching system will find obsolete the idea of value, ignoring the impulse to try to match two things of equal value altogether. Heidenreich explains, the very idea of value is derived from the money fantasy. That homogeneous universal ideas of value is one of the big mental roadblocks to imagining alternatives. We are so accustomed to dealing with money that we internalize all those calculations. Matching could be a negotiation procedure that takes into account personal history, urgency, utility, lots of other factors. We don't need a value, we need a match, a decision, a transaction. You can see this on the level of daily life. You probably want a coffee in the morning, not at night. You might consistently want a car, but if you see it as a mobility provider rather than a constant asset, your desire for a ride shifts constantly. On that personal level, there isn't monolithic value. There's a huge variety of changing desires and decisions. That's where a matching system could most obviously come in. Heidenreich theorizes that this matching and distribution of goods and labor can be accomplished by relying on the help of networks, algorithms, and artificial intelligence, which we've already talked about, has some issues of its own. Mm-hmm. But Heidenreich explains that money exists just to serve three functions: payment, value, and storage. And this last one about storage is where societies run into problems. Invariably, it leads to people storing as much money as possible for a rainy day. And as Heidenreich explains, each valuation of goods and professions shifts in favor of assets and their accumulation. This is what leads to the wealth hoarding we see today. Removing money so that it does not exist as an asset to be stored abolishes the storage of value and assets and replaces the functions of value and payment with the algorithmically supported distribution of things and activities, he explains. So there's a whole bunch of other systems in addition to his theory of moneyless economies. Do you know of any? Have you?
Of moneyless economies?
Yeah.
Besides parties? No.
I think that's a good example.
I mean, if you think of like certain like religions that are supposed to not be, for profit, those are moneyless economies. Like I was thinking of like, oh golly, like old monasteries or nunneries. Whatever those are called.
Kind of communal living situation.
Yeah, like that's what I would think of as like a, moneyless, type of situation.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different types of moneyless economies, in addition to parties and nunneries.
Where the nuns are made.
Yes, and they party. Nunnery parties, the ultimate moneyless economy. So there is mutualism, which is pretty similarly linked to gifting economies of the past. And that's when people contribute to a community without payment, not only to help, but also because they expect to be helped by a member of the community when in need in the future. It's the idea that we just help each other out, and if you take care of the community will take care of you. Mutualism as a doctrine founds the basis of many like social anarchism and socialist schools of thought, and it's a driving force behind the idea of mutual aid. We also have like a redistribution economy, which is an idea that's similar to mutualism, but with the aid of a centralized headquarters for administration. So kind of what that Heidenreich guy was talking about. So it is a little more centralized than decentralized as an option. The centralized headquarters distributes all resources as needed to help the people, and some people believe that things like Heidenreich's computer-based matching system could serve as the administrative centralized force for these endeavors.
That is also kind of like that Ursula K. Le Guin book, The Dispossessed. Really? Oh my gosh.
I still can't believe I haven't read it. I should probably read it. The third is a debt system, which is just like if you give something to someone, they should return in kind as quickly as possible. There's no formal money in a debt system. Instead, it's kind of like a loan, which is a form of debt via objects or service with the expectation it's returned. So you shoveled my driveway this week. Next week I'll shovel yours, kind of a thing.
Gotcha.
And then there's also communism, which is, of course, a moneyless, classless, and stateless society wherein the means of production are publicly owned, which just means that instead of having a boss who owns the building you work in and pays you $10 to make something he can sell for $100, allowing him to keep all of that $90 of profit, the businesses are just owned by the workers altogether with no big boss at the top and no profit incentive. The end goal of communism is, a moneyless society where goods and services are instead distributed from each according to their ability to each according to their need. Then there's this thing called labor vouchers, which operates similarly to money since they can be used to acquire resources based on the number of hours you've worked. In Karl Marx's explanation of a lower phase of communism, which was kind of the transition phase between capitalism and communism that now many people are like, oh, that was pretty much socialism he was describing, even though he used the words socialism and communism interchangeably. Marx thought that the labor vouchers would serve as a transition into a moneyless economy, replacing money initially. But instead, every person who could work would be issued with a labor voucher according to either the duration or intensity of the work they carried out, and then they would use that to exchange for goods and services. To me, that sounds pretty much like money, though.
Kind of, yeah.
Right, but you can only get it in exchange for labor.
Gotcha.
Which...
For shoveling the driveways.
For shoveling the driveways, right. Which is good when you look at people just like acquiring money for just investing and not actually doing labor. But bad, I think, when you look at it through the lens of like disability advocacy.
Yes.
Right. So then the next one is the gift economy, which we talked about before. This already exists, obviously, around us in small scale today. Every time you give a gift to a friend, like something you don't use anymore, or loan a neighbor the proverbial cup of sugar, right? It even exists at like events, like Burning Man, I think, does a moneyless gifting economy, right? You can't bring money to Burning Man?
I would not know.
I would not know either.
Burning Man is a mystery to me. Sometimes I would like to keep it that way, but it's fine.
I think about the Malcolm in the Middle episode where they went
to
Burning Man.
Yes, I always thought, I think we've talked about this before. It is the best piece of 90s sitcom television.
Yeah.
When Malcolm in the Middle goes to Burning Man. It was like a shift in society.
I think so. I think it was a cultural shift. Yeah, it was the moment. There's this other event, though, that I looked up, which definitely does this, called the Rainbow Gathering.
I remember when I was a teenager in Colorado, all the punks would go to the Rainbow Gathering.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's an annual festival in which about 10,000 people gather for a month in the woods and agree not to bring any money. So groups of attendees set up kitchens where they prepare and serve food for thousands of people every day, all for free. Everyone just kind of takes care of each other.
I think those kids were doing other stuff. They were gifting and giving other stuff.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll?
Possibly. But I think it was more hippie. But
okay.
There's a lot of like crusty punk hippie crossover.
There
like
really
Crass
is.
style.
Yes. So it was sex, drugs, and drum circles.
Yes. Oh my God.
Wow. So within these gift economies, there is sometimes like an explicit expectation of reciprocity, but often it's done without any expectation at all, and it's more of like a moral obligation or sense of duty to the community. So other examples of gift economies include sharing of food in like hunter-gatherer societies, where sharing was a safeguard against failure of any individual's own personal daily foraging. The Northwest Coast potlatch rituals of indigenous people, where leaders give away large amounts of food to their followers, strengthening group relations. By sacrificing accumulated wealth, the leader gained a position of honor instead. There's also Southeast Asia Theravada Buddhist feasts of merit, similar to the potlatch, except that such feasts involve many sponsors of all types and continue to this day, mainly before and after rainy seasons rather than chiefly in winter. There's also a family, which each generation pays for the education of the next. This is an example where the gift creates an implicit obligation to give a gift to a third party rather than to the giver. And there's also things like open source computer software development.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like, here's my code, build on it, and then I can use yours whenever you want. Or whatever I want.
That helped me out a lot in college.
Right.
Thank you, all the people who shared on the internet.
That's how I feel about people who purchase things online and then upload photos of it. As like the reviews, where you can see what it actually looks like in their home. I'm like, wow, this is the real work being done.
Yes. Thank you, all those people. We needed to know.
Yes. There's also a subsistence economy, which kind of reminds me of like anarcho-primitivism in some ways, I think. It's an economy which is not based on money, in which buying and selling are absent or rudimentary through like slight barter, but it commonly provides like a minimal standard of living. It's one of the oldest approaches to market management, and it's wealth in a subsistence economy that is determined just by an individual or family's ability to provide for themselves through activities like hunting, fishing, gathering, food cultivation, handmade homes, those kinds of things that are the primary drivers behind survival. So the goal is just to maintain existence rather than create a surplus for investment and growth. And this also kind of reminds me of like the fantasies I assume we all have, but maybe I'm the only one who has them, where you're like, oh no, I got stuck on this deserted island all by myself, and I never have to labor again. I just have to build my little house and go gather and fish and chill. I
know. I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I would die. I'd die so fast. The first bug I had to eat, I'd be like, no.
I would eat a bug, I think.
I would eat a bug, but I don't know. I don't know if any structure that I made would realistically hold up in any sort of gust of wind.
You know, when I was a kid, we had to go to maybe the Sequoias or Yosemite, and we had to do this like 6th grade survival camp. Did you guys have to do this?
No.
Maybe this is a California thing. So we had to go to 6th grade survival camp, and they teach you how to survive in nature. And one of the things they make you do, and it's the middle of winter, it's snow everywhere, they make you build a shelter, and then the leader of the activity, an adult, would get up on the shelter and jump up and down, and you had to, in order to pass, you had to make sure your shelter didn't collapse when they did that.
Whoa.
So I made a dome structure out of twigs and sticks and tree branches packed with snow, and it withheld the jumping.
Huh.
So I think that in a subsistence economy, I could at least come up with something akin to a tent on my own, a tent of some kind.
You should do that show Naked and Afraid.
I do not think I would survive there. No, because they're all alone. But that's the thing about the subsistence economy.
Oh, you got your
with
bros.
With a community, you got your bros. It's like alone in the woods? No, but I feel like you, me, say we bring like 5 people we know. I feel like a group of 7 of us, we could survive.
Yeah, but I got back problems. I don't know how well I would do after a while. Y'all would have to take care of me.
We would do that. That's okay. We would take care of you. So then this other one that I looked up that actually like kind of had me dying, it was kind of funny, is called paradisum or paradisum with paradise, but it's like an ism. So
Paradisism?
Paradism?
We'll never know.
We'll never know. But it's a world without money, work, government, or disease.
Hell yeah.
Claim, yeah. Led by a political system that's similar to communism but has no proletariat. So in a paradise system, robots, nanobots, and computers take the place of the proletariat or workforce. So
it's like Futurama?
Oh, maybe, yeah, it's Bender. Yeah, it calls for nationalizing all production via robotic labor.
Interesting.
Yes.
Is there going to be some sort of Elon Musk trapdoor in there somewhere?
It's a little weird. We'll find out.
You know what? Sometimes you want to be like, yes, and then you're like, but what's the catch?
No, I know. It definitely reminds me of the Grimes TikTok where she's petting the robot dog.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm like skeptical of it, but also just the website you have to look at the website. It's paradism.org. Something about it is very accessible and like rudimentary language, which I appreciate. But also when you're reading, you're like, this just sounds ridiculous. And you're like, is it actually ridiculous or am I just not ready for it?
It's kind of about, I like that shit. Oh, fuck. It's, I forget what it's called. It's escaping me. But basically, the tech people who when you die, want to be uploaded to the cloud.
Yeah, I would like that. I would do that. I'd be into that.
I think there's, I've listened to some stuff about it or like read some stuff about it where like you think like there's still some I think there's still some weird stuff in there too, I'm sure, just because of the nature of like the people who are in it, but it does strike me as being very similar. And the singularity. Yeah, I think like the singularity is also interesting because I think the singularity is the name that they use for the theory in physics that's supposed to like unify, or maybe it's unification maybe
theory.
I'm thinking of what is it?
It's supposed to unify like mainstream physics and then like quantum
physics with like Newtonian traditional physics.
Exactly, Newtonian, yes.
I'm like, yeah. That was like one college class that I did well in, weirdly enough. But I had a good teacher. It wasn't because I was smart.
I think you're smart. Yeah, no, so like this stuff's interesting though, especially because we did our episode about AI and you're like, well, I don't want to trust the computer algorithms with our whole life.
That's the thing, it's like I feel like with this kind of stuff, if you need technology to implement it, the philosophy or moral trust behind it needs to be very solid and good.
Yeah, we need to have worked out all the kinks that make all of our AI now super racist and sexist.
And maybe we need to work on ourselves first.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's like you gotta fight like with the culture war within you. Like we gotta like change the people to change the robots. But I mean, this idea is interesting because it's like, okay, so this whole idea they have is like technology can free us of the need to use money while also saving us from labor. And paradism aims at giving all jobs to machines to free the people from their forced labor, creating a paradise wherein all can live as the top 1% do now without work.
I think that's super interesting. My thing is, I think that people like having community and like doing stuff and like making bespoke stuff.
Well, yeah, when we did that thing about, like, the 40-hour work week, like, all of the studies find that people are actually happiest when they work 8 hours a week. Like, you're happier working 8 hours a week than not working at all.
I think in a moneyless economy, there would still be people who are like, I want to make, like, specialty coffee for people.
Yes.
Like, I want to make, like, delicious desserts for people. I want to make fucking, like, rad jewelry for people and, like, clothing and stuff. I don't know, like, but that's not necessarily, like, I still think that people like to do activities, and people might even want to do activities like, hey, I want to help, like, make sure all the streets are clean. Like, I want to make sure that people can, like, do this and that, where it's like, I guess maybe that would be worked out, but yeah, I'm trying to work out the kinks of a system that doesn't even fucking work yet. So,
well, it is supposed to just free people from forced labor.
Yeah.
So obviously, yeah, people still have the drive within themselves because they care about other people who do things for their community and do what we would non-traditionally think of as labor.
Yeah, and I think it also would have to be, like, take into account, like, the ecology that we live in, where it's like, if we keep producing more and more and more,
right, it's unsustainable for the planet. Yeah. So according to, though, this paradism.org website, which I highly recommend everybody look at.
Oh my god. Oh wait, is this the Grimes one?
No, I mean, it's the theory that kind of sounds Grimesy,
okay, gotcha.
But she's not actually involved in it. She or they, I am not sure the current pronoun usage for Grimes, I apologize. When all the production and services will have been given to robots and made available to all, there will be no need for money. This is what the website says. The resources will be shared and used with wisdom so as to give everyone the comfort, the health, and leisure that they are entitled to. Nothing will be traded for a price. Everyone's creation or contribution will be an offering to others. Love will become the new currency.
Do we have to make anything a currency? Even love?
Well, the website also says that in paradise, there are no countries because there are no frontiers. I kind of fuck with that. That's cool.
Yeah.
There are no jails because there is no police. Yes.
Sick.
There are no politicians because there is no government. Love it. A human cannot be made a slave, a subject, or turned into a sheep. It is a crime against humanity. A human being cannot be ruled or governed by anyone else but him or herself. And a human being is the master of their own life, the creator of their own destiny. That one gets a little Randian at the end.
I was going to be like, but does it take into account, like, I think the problem sometimes is hierarchy. It's not the currency itself.
Yeah, I think it's like a combo of both. But I do think removing money removes the incentive for a lot of hierarchy. Mm-hmm. So, okay, there's also this thing that you were talking about, like, how it's unsustainable to just continue to endlessly produce for the sake of production, right? Well, the Paradism website says something about that, too.
Oh, okay.
It says, fighting pollution is of little interest in our current economic system where maximizing profit prevails in every decision. It only becomes a concern when it's already too late. The health and well-being of the people and of all life forms is the highest, if not the only priority of paradism. Resources will primarily go towards repairing the earth and keeping it safe and clean for all life. It implies an immediate, unilateral, and complete demilitarization, along with the dismantling and the banning of all weapons designed to kill or injure human beings.
Cool.
I like that. Yeah. Paradism maintains that this is the part where it gets weird to me. This is the only part where I'm like, that one. They say everything a human being can do can be done better by robots. And that's the one where I'm like, that's the hang up I get.
Robots are better at math.
Yeah,
I mean,
better at
what
math.
Are they? They're better at math. Jeopardy. Chess. Like I can't manufacture shit on my own.
Yeah, the robots are helpful.
But I think that gives away, like, I don't know. I think that we do still, yeah, I would argue with that, but I am not a very good philosopher. I'm just like, humans have consciousness that they need to take into account the morality of other people and trying to be a good person.
Well, also just when we did our episode about AI and you're just like, cool, we literally compounded and codified all of our worst issues in humanity into our computer systems. Like, I think this may be the issue I have with this is it falls into the myth that, like, computers are a neutral, objective third party with no motivation of their own, but it fails to like acknowledge that like we built them. We built the machines, and the machines are codified with our own biases and failures in them. So it's hard to imagine this until you address the current issues of bias intrinsic in things like artificial intelligence technology.
Yeah, because you just project the biases onto the robots.
Right, exactly. And you're like, it's not a bias, it's an objective third party, it's the robot, it just does the facts, but they don't do the facts.
Then you make a racist chess robot.
Right, and then imagine the racist chess robot is the one making sure everybody gets the food they need.
Yeah.
Like, that's not... I think there's some issues with bias in technology that need to be addressed before this thing fully come to light. But I do appreciate a lot about this. It seems extremely similar to the concept of fully automated luxury communism to me.
What I think about this is a lot of these are about working out the technical kinks or like working out the logistics. But it's, to me, what also goes in that, if you're going to talk about like robots replicating humanity, is working on how people see other people and working on like what you want to call like ethics or like a shared like morality of like, this is what we aim for. We aim to be better people. We aim to treat others with kindness. We aim to, shared things that we think are important, such as like everybody has the right to like health, housing, happiness, etc. Where it's like, or we have to work on these ideas where it's like, just because a person can't work doesn't mean that they're not a worthwhile, person.
Right.
We have all these like cultural trappings of like, well, I think a lot of people are like, well, I work really hard. Someone doesn't work as hard as me. Like, that is something that needs to be addressed because that, or like someone's unfairly getting ahead. And, in these types of situations, we're like, well, we can't, codify a system of fairness. And I would say now, well, capitalism is truly unfair.
Right. We haven't done it in the past. We're not doing it now.
But I think it's like, we have to go, like, before we start, like, alongside of all these, like, technological, logistical things of how you would allocate resources and stuff, like, people allocate resources a lot of times too, depending on their worldview.
Right. It's intuitive for a lot of people.
Where it's like, or things that we think of as true, such as like money's always existed. That's not always, that's not true. Or like people have these biases that they don't even know about that affect these logistical things too, about like how resources are allocated. Or like, like I think about in the subsistence one, where you're just like, well, what about like children, elderly people, people with disabilities who can't fucking work? Like,
right.
Do they not have value in the society because they can't provide labor? Like, you have to think about that too, where it's like, oh, well, no, everybody has like intrinsic value and stuff. But I feel like if you don't address those like philosophical, ethical questions, the logistics can kind of be like fall away.
I think you definitely have to fight the culture war first, right? That's like the thing everybody says. It's like you've got to figure out how to get people on the same page with like valuing human life and like valuing compassion and valuing each other. Before you get into the logistics of like exactly how resources are allocated. That's like what lots of people believe. I mean, I think you could probably work through both in tandem at the same time.
I think so too.
Yeah, they inspire each other. Like sometimes it takes you sitting down to solve the issue of resource allocation to even understand like the difference between equality and equity,
And sometimes, even though I'm like maybe going, back on what I said, or like I'm just thinking like, sometimes you implement policies that people are like against because they're like conservative, like I don't want like to be given out welfare, or you give people money who normally would be like, you can't give people money, and they like it and they shut up about it, and everyone likes it, or they're like, okay, well I guess this is just like, people just are like, oh, this works, do
right,
we're trucking along like, oh, we can't get rid of money, blah blah blah. You get rid of money and things are fine and people like it and they just shut up about it.
Right. I think it's like the change is what's hard for people, but like in reality, once you get past the idea that things are different and that's scary, most people acclimate pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a phone software update. Yeah. Everyone hates it the first day, and the second day nobody's talking about it anymore.
I mean,
unless something's really wrong.
Yeah. I mean, even with COVID, like I literally I don't even think anymore putting on my mask before going into a store.
Right. It's second nature.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have one more example of a non-monetary economic theory in here that I want to talk about, but there's so many more. But this one was called a non-market eco-socialism. So this was kind of advocated by Anitra Nelson. And based on this theory, each household kind of guesstimates its basic needs, which are met in return for collective production as a community obligation. So then the production, distribution, and procurement of goods and services from more distant communities are also collectively agreed on. And as in other forms of socialism, there is still personal property, but no private property. So that means you get to keep your personal property, which is the stuff you have that you use, like your house and your coffee cup and your shoes. And it's just, private property we don't have anymore, which is a different category of thing. It's property you use just to generate a profit that you don't actually utilize yourself, right? It'd be like owning an apartment building or owning a business or something like that. So, this is like other forms of eco-socialism, which is socialism just with like a focus on protecting the planet and the environment. There's this increased focus on the planet's well-being and recovering from the crisis of pollution and ecological destruction that capitalism has created by consistently overproducing just for the sake of profit. So this posits that any monetary practice is inclined to give way to capitalism and critiques forms of socialism that have retained use of money as sliding into state capitalism rather than representing socialism like in its truest forms. So according to Nelson, the non-market eco-socialist pathway focuses on use rights and use values, building collectively sufficient local communities directly governing production and exchange. These communities network with neighboring communities through to global communities to collaboratively manage joint resources for global solidarity and cultural activities. In this kind of networked community-based socialism, people's needs are expressed as use values, and the power vested in their use rights to commons facilitate direct decision-making without recourse to money. Indeed, as we experience every day in capitalism, the logic and practices of production for trade and prices, she says, only interrupt and frustrate the exercise of direct power and substitute or contort the balancing of social and environmental values that are based in use values rather than exchange values. So it's just this idea that it's like, yeah, things hold value because you're using them and you need that. Mm-hmm. And it, like all socialism, removes the incentive to own things that you don't use just for the sake of generating profit. I also like the balance that lots of like more eco-focused forms of leftism are currently taking, where they're prioritizing the well-being of the planet in service to people, not at the expense of people. Mm-hmm. Like societies can still function. We can care about both. We care about the planet because we need the planet for people to live, right?
Yeah.
And I like that it kind of balances those out. So.
Yeah. It's so funny to me because I feel like a lot of resistance to a non-moneyed economy, and I don't know if this is taking it on a side tangent or whatever, is because I feel like I've talked to other people about like stuff like this, and they're just like, even people who I thought were like lefties or whatever, and they're like, oh, but people are lazy. And I'm like, I don't actually think that people default are lazy. I think they're put in jobs that suck.
Yeah.
And people assume that when push comes to shove, if you had a more community, monetize things, that people would just be selfish. But because I feel like that's the way that we're conditioned in capitalism to think, right, is selfishness, because you need all the stuff, because there are evil people out there who will brutalize and fuck you up. And I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think that people generally get along. Otherwise we would just, I think we've talked about this before. And that also, if you're not a religious person, how can you believe in evil? Yeah. If you are a religious person, maybe you believe in evil, right, or whatever. But to me, that's such it's such a strange concept to be basing a society around. I feel like now it's like basing a society off of an action movie, like with the military. Right. We literally base like a huge portion of our society in like something that like people think that, or like with gun ownership, people literally think that they're going to have a shootout like in an action movie where they're like, I have a gun, there's a man holding my wife hostage and I have to shoot the hostage taker before he shoots my wife. Like, we base our society off of these things that actually are kind of like, when you start talking about it, seem like silly.
Yeah, it's like fanciful ideas of threats rather than the real threats. It's like we have the real threat, which is that capitalism creates systems of false scarcity that force us to compete with our neighbors over resources because we're not given enough resources to survive. It's not that like evildoers are coming into your home to steal your shit.
And do you think that people are intrinsically born evil, or do you think that society makes them that way if you believe in evil?
Right. It's like, yeah, more that. Well, also, I think like it's hard for us to imagine a world in which people are just altruistic for people or altruistic to other people if you have been brought up in a system of capitalism where we're constantly like that idea is shoved down our throats that like it's every man for himself, like people are competitive, people are selfish, that's human nature. And then you look back in history and you're like, well, actually people have been existing in more community-based ways for centuries. That's not human nature. That's the type of like humanity that existing in a system of capitalism creates in us. Like that's the nature of humanity today under capitalism.
And then, you know, it even gets down to like, you know, the family structure and what does that mean? And like the patriarchal, like it opens so many more windows to people, you know, like of things that like could be contributing to this quote, why people are quote lazy or quote evil. And it's like, maybe they're not set up to thrive.
Right.
And then they act in a way that you perceive as lazy or evil.
Right.
And it's so strange to me.
Right. I also, the lazy thing, I'm like, I kind of don't care if people are lazy.
I kind of don't care either, but it's like one of those things, if your whole society is set up to produce, right. Then that is a very, like, that's an important thing. If your society is set up to maintain the earth, maintain human and earth ecosystem, but like, you realize that being lazy is, maybe you see it as like, oh, they're recharging. Not everyone needs to work. The fact that someone is alive makes them a worthwhile human being, regardless of their actions, because they are not existing in a vacuum.
The value of our existence is not productivity and labor.
Yeah. So it's like, it opens up a whole lot of other things that people don't want to think about.
Yeah. I think like an interesting thing is, you know, in all of these different like theories of non-monetary economies, there's nuance in like the practical application of them, right? But the fact kind of remains that when you remove money from communities, it creates an opportunity for a more humanized and compassionate like system of care for that community.
Yeah, and it's not like, I think people often worry about like interpersonal problems, like a lot in then realizing it's a systemic, like we're talking about systems. We're not talking about interpersonal problems. And we're not talking about you, the self, governing every single thing around you or intermediating between personal disputes, which are always going to happen. That's just the part of being human. Like,
so there's this it's a multidisciplinary investigation into the whys and hows of human cooperation, and it's called the Human Generosity Project. And this is like this project that seeks to like look at different cultures and assess them and see how generous each kind of community is. And they found that in certain communities, giving to those in need with like no expectation of return is just normalized. It's expected. And this behavior kind of exists all around the planet, which also shows that the instinct to care for one another, that is a part of human nature. It's our instinct to care about other people. And it's often just socialized out of us by our environment or political and economic systems that try to convince us it's a bad thing to care about others. But these communities who have retained the idea of cooperation and generosity, findings thus far from this Human Generosity Project suggest that generous societies are more likely to survive during difficult times.
Oh, for sure.
During crisis, we see communities even previously disposed towards financial competitiveness drop everything just to help each other out. And those are the communities that survive hardships. One simulation modeled data gathered from societies that use conflicting models of generosity. There's this thing called need-based transfer, which is where things are given to people in need with no expectation of return unless you yourself are in need in the future. There's another in which sharing resources occurs with the expectation of repayment in a practice called account keeping. So that's a little more kept track of. And a third in which there's no sharing whatsoever. So it's kind of like a scale, right? And the test was modeled after the Maasai pastoral lifestyle, which involves sharing cattle. The simulation would randomly generate drought or disease, and the researchers could see how the herds endured in each simulated society. Both forms of sharing, the simulation revealed, resulted in better herd survival than the no sharing of cattle. But needs-based transfer led to more pooling of resources, longer survival of the herd, and greater wealth equality than account keeping did. So where sharing and generosity are good for practical reasons in communities, they're also just good for people. In a 2010 meta-analysis of previous research, Julianne Holt-Lundstad of Brigham Young University and colleagues found that having stronger social ties and less social isolation significantly prolonged one's life. As researcher John Cacioppo writes in his book Loneliness, Human Nature and the Need for Social Connection, the more extensive the reciprocal altruism born of social connection, the greater the advance towards health, wealth, and happiness. A 2008 study by Harvard Business School professor Michael Norton and colleagues showed that giving a sum of money away to somebody else lifted well-being more than if you'd spent that same money on yourself, like once your basic needs were met. Paul Zak, founding director of the Center for Neuroeconomics Studies at Claremont Graduate University, studies the effects of oxytocin in social exchanges. His lab has found that when people share and experience gratitude or any sense of connection, their brains release the hormone oxytocin. Though more commonly associated with breastfeeding, oxytocin is actually also known to relieve stress, improve immune function, and foster trust in human interactions, all of which contribute to a greater well-being and happiness. In laboratory studies, Zach has found that a dose of oxytocin will cause people to give more generously and to feel more empathetic towards others they come across, with symptoms lasting up to 2 hours. So these people on an oxytocin high can potentially jumpstart like a virtuous circle where one's generous behavior triggers another's. Studies have found that sharing builds trust and all around is correlated with higher levels of happiness and health. By contrast, not having enough money is a top cause of stress for many Americans, according to a Stress in America survey conducted by the American Psychological Association. Stress, on the flip side, negatively affects health and even contributes to chronic health problems like diabetes and heart disease. Several studies have shown that wealth also might be at odds with empathy and compassion. Researchers published in the journal Psychological Science found that people of lower economic status were better at reading others' facial expressions, which is kind of like used as a marker of empathy than wealthier people. A lot of what we see is a baseline orientation for the lower class to be more empathetic and the upper class to be less so, study co-author Michael Krauss told Time magazine. Lower class environments are much different from upper class environments. Lower class individuals have to respond chronically to a number of vulnerabilities and social threats. You really need to depend on others. They will tell you if a social threat or opportunity is coming, and that makes you more perceptive to emotions. Wealth accumulation can also cloud moral judgment. A UC Berkeley study found that in San Francisco, where the law requires that cars stop at a crosswalk for pedestrians to pass, drivers of luxury cars were 4 times less likely than those in less expensive vehicles to stop and allow pedestrians the right of way. They were also more likely to cut off other drivers, which goes along with my theory that people in nice cars are assholes. Another study suggested that merely thinking about money can lead you to unethical behavior. Researchers from Harvard and the University of Utah found that study participants were more likely to lie or behave immorally after being exposed to just money-related words.
Cool.
The pursuit of wealth itself can also become a compulsive behavior. As psychologist Dr. Tian Dayton explained, a compulsive need to acquire money is often considered part of a class of behaviors known as process addictions or behavioral addictions, which are distinct from substance abuse. Additionally, wealthier children tend to be more distressed than lower income kids and are at high risk for anxiety, depression, substance abuse, eating disorders, cheating, and stealing. Research has also found high instances of binge drinking and drug use amongst children of high-income two-parent white families who have a lot of privilege in society and often are able to develop wealth at higher rates than their peer groups. And extremely affluent people in adulthood suffer from higher rates of depression. So there's no direct correlation between income and happiness, right? Like the more money you make after a certain point doesn't make you any happier. There's just a correlation between having your basic human needs met and happiness. But the goal of a moneyless society would be to do just that, right? Meet all of our needs while removing the apparatus that allows for inequality to fester, putting both the wealthy at risk mentally and emotionally, from what it sounds like, and putting the poor at risk physically by removing their access to resources. So the moneyed economies we see end up being just like a lose-lose system in the end in need of radical rethinking.
Yes.
So what do you think? Do you have any final ideas about this moneyless economy idea?
Fuck money.
Fuck money, right?
Is that just always my answer?
Yeah, I think
fuck
that's the
money
end of every episode. It's just fuck that. No, but I do agree. I mean, I think it's like we fall so much into that idea just to keep doing things because we've always done them this way. And then it's like, we haven't even always done it this way. And nobody actually really benefits from this.
Yeah, I think that's just like a fallacy that people fall into. It's like, this is the way it's always been, and trying to change it is futile. That's actually like classical conservatism, is being like, you can't change anything because it's futile and it'll actually make things worse. And I think people fall into that.
Yeah, it's like a fear-based thing.
With like no evidence to the contrary.
I think it's cool, though, that there's been, like, a new interest in living a moneyless lifestyle. Or, like, not... Like, it's hard to make your whole life and your whole existence moneyless, obviously. Like, there's nowhere you can just go live for free and exist in the world. Like, you need to engage in society and earn income in order to pay for things. But I think it's cool that, like, buy nothing groups are getting more popular, where people are like, I'm not buying anything, and then they just, like, trade amongst themselves or give away things they don't need. I think I've always used a lot is free Craigslist, which is a good example of that. Whenever I have something extra that I don't need, I'll put it on free Craigslist, and I always go and look on free Craigslist for things that I can get from people as well that they're not using. So I think it is cool, and I feel like it's on the rise that people are trying to incorporate these ideas of, like, reciprocity and gift giving just in their own little ways that they can in their life, just by giving to others.
Free Craigslist USA.
Free Craigslist USA. Free Craigslist for president. Is that it? Is that the episode? I think that's it.
Thank you so much for listening to us. If you would like to support us, we have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. For $2 a month, you can ask us questions that we may answer in a bonus or regular episode, and you will get access to new weekly bonus episodes, which you can hear us, rant and answer questions. If you don't want to support us on Patreon, that is totally fine. If you'd like to give us a review on iTunes, that would be amazing. I believe it helps us in some way with algorithm stuff or getting it out there to other people who might like it. Anyway, regardless, we love you. Thanks again.